Hello.
Hello.
I hope we're all settled. Yeah, can we start? Yes. Okay, I think we can start. We're all settled. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had an enjoyable lunch break. Okay, this is the third panel for today. It's also the last one. My name is Venera Demukai. I'm an assistant professor of economics at RIT Kosovo, and I will be moderating this panel. The focus of this panel would be on the nexus between quality of institutions and economic growth. As we all know, last year, the Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded to Daron Acemoglu, recognizing decades of scholarship showing that institutions are the fundamental drivers of long-term prosperity. His work, alongside James Robinson and others, has profoundly shaped our understanding of why nations grow or why they stagnate. Inclusive political and economic institutions capable of enforcing rules, fostering innovation, and encouraging investment are the machinery of growth. This insight resonates particularly with the topic of this panel, and I would like to take cue from the Riinvest Institute's latest report, Navigating Kosovo's Economic Path. The report points out that while macroeconomic stability has been preserved and reforms undertaken, the economic transformation needed to escape the middle income trap through higher productivity, export diversification, innovation, human capital mobilization remain constrained. At the same time, the global economic discourse has been and has seen a renewed focus on industrial policy. The EU's very own Green Deal and digital agenda, they reflect a pragmatic return to strategic state involvement. The Riinvest report, too, points to the need for an economic growth model which would be centered on productive investment, export diversification, and innovation. For Kosovo, the challenge is clear. How can it escape the middle income trap? By combining institutional reform with smart industrial policy. And how can this strategy be aligned with EU integration agenda? To discuss these questions, we are joined by a panel of distinguished scholars who bring deep expertise in economics, governance, institutional development across the region. They combine academic research with high-level policy and advisory experience. So let me introduce the panel members. I will introduce them as they were listed in the agenda. Adnan Efendic from the School of Economics and Business, University of Sarajevo. Adnan is Professor of Economics, Head of the Department of Economic Theory and Policy, and Editor-in-Chief of the Southeast European Journal of Economics and Business. He is also member of editorial board of the Post-Communist Economies Journal. He is affiliate fellow at Serge IE in Prague. Professor Efendic's current research is focused on formal and informal institutions in the Western Balkan region. Online via Zoom, we have Professor Bartlett, who is a visiting senior fellow at the LSE Research Unit on Southeast Europe at LSE's European Institute. He has held academic positions at several UK universities and was Professor of Social Economics at the University of Bristol. From 2009 to 2015, he served as Senior Research Fellow in the Political Economy of Southeast Europe at LSE, where he founded and continues to coordinate research network on social cohesion. In addition to his academic work, Professor Bartlett has led major research projects for the European Commission in the Western Balkans, has also consulted for the European Parliament, UNDP, World Bank, and other international bodies. On my left, Professor Irai Hoshi, Emeritus Professor of Economics at Staffordshire University. Professor Hoshi has been actively involved in research, teaching, and consultancy in the transition economies of Central and Eastern Europe since 1992. He has collaborated with universities and research institutions in countries including Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, Czech Republic, Kosovo, Macedonia, Poland, and Russia on a wide range of projects addressing the challenge of economic transition funded by the European Commission, World Bank, and other international agencies. On my right, Fatmir Besimi is a professor of economics at Southeastern Europe University. He previously served as Minister of Finance of North Macedonia, following earlier high-level roles including Deputy Prime Minister for European Affairs, Minister of Economy, Minister of Defense, and Vice Governor of the National Bank. He's the author of 2 books and was named a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum. His research at LSE focuses on the political economy of European integration in the Western Balkans. Professor Besnik Krasniqi from the Academy of Sciences and Arts in Kosovo. He's Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation and Circular Economy at University of Pristina. His career spans teaching and research in entrepreneurship in several universities in Europe and outside of Europe in the United States, such as Maastricht School of Management, Indiana University, University of Michigan, University Côte d'Azur, University of Vienna. Professor Krasniqi's research focuses on entrepreneurship, small and medium-sized enterprises, innovation, informal economies, and institutional development in post-conflict and transition economies. Dear colleagues, thank you so much for joining us in this panel. So I will start this discussion with the first round of questions. The Riinvest report calls for Kosovo to move beyond a consumption-driven, remittance-supported growth model towards a supply-side strategy. And the center would be on competitiveness, innovation, and structural upgrading. Sectors such as ICT, renewable energy, and agro-processing are cited as candidates for catalyzing investments. In light of this, I would like to invite insights from Professor Hoshi, who is here with us, but also Professor Bartlett, who has joined us online, about the type of institutional reforms and lessons learned from EU and regional countries on avoiding this middle-income trap. Professor Hoshi, the report also talks about a lot of improvements that the country has made, but then there's also a lot of things that need to be improved, such as policy implementation. So we're talking about how to escape the middle-income trap. We would like to hear more your views on what would be these kind of institutional reforms that at this point you think are the most critical in order to unlock Kosovo's potential to move now from a middle-income country to a high-income country.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Venera. And I'd like to thank Riinvest colleagues for inviting me to this very important conference, and also repeat my congratulations to 30 years of hard work and good work in Kosovo. A lot has happened in Kosovo in the last 30 years. And most people, especially the younger people, don't remember it. People have very short memory of bad times. But I first came to Kosovo in 1999, and we were unable to go to certain places because there were mines there still. And from that position to today, where we have a modern economy and modern society, we have come a long way. And we must not forget the progress that has been made. I mean, it was made clear in the report that there has been a lot of progress. But at the same time, people need or want to see faster change and faster movement towards a normal life. And so the significant improvements have been made. There's regulatory arrangements in place. There is independent regulators. There is independent judiciary. There is press freedom. There is contract enforcement. All of these exist in Kosovo, but not quite as well established as one would like to. And many of these achievements seem to be easily reverting back. With few speeches by important people, government people, influential people. Suddenly, newspapers feel they don't have the same freedom. Businesses feel that the rules have changed, and so on and so forth. I mean, there's a saying that says, if things are so good, why are they so bad? Mm-hmm. So where are these, the problems? Kosovo is good in various areas. I mean, we have in the report, OECD competitiveness outlook puts Kosovo above other Western Balkan countries. But at the same time, the rule of law or studies ranking Kosovo is below, and in various surveys, firms complain about the procurement processes, about issuing of permits and licenses, complex administration, and citizens, the majority of citizens believe that there is widespread corruption in the public sector. So, and you know, and corruption perception index for Kosovo is low. Kosovo is 41st of 41 out of 100 countries, and below global average. Well, it is a situation where there are lots of things in place, but they're not implemented, or the implementation is weak. I'll go to some other issues after we come the next round of questioning, but at this stage, really the areas which need important, urgent attention are, well, implementation of laws and regulations. In many areas, there are good laws and regulations in place, but they're not implemented. There is corruption control. Corruption is one of those elements of informal institutions which have persevered over the years. And it is really becomes important when the formal institutions fail to deliver goods. Businesses, when they can't go through the legal process to work out to run their normal business of daily business, they resort to bribery and using informal personal connections and networks. Foreign firms, we all talk about FDI, maybe in the next round we come back, they're also stuck in this position that they either don't have these local connections, or they go into partnership with some firms that do have informal networks and informal connections. So the control of corruption, it is talked about, but little systematic is done to stop it or to prevent it. The justice system is overcrowded. The disputes take long time to resolve, although there is the commercial court which has recently been set up to deal with at least the economic disputes and business disputes, but it is not just business disputes that are in the legal process, and lengthy, subject to these lengthy justice procedures. Informal sector, which undermines competition, and the firms that are operating in the legal sector, is another important problem. Public appointments, I mean, this is related to corruption and nepotism, and the existence of informal institutions. Public appointments are not transparent and genuinely competitive. At one point, you all remember that the foreign embassies, particularly British embassy, was involved in the appointment of certain high-level positions. But they withdrew because the government decided to make appointments without without consulting these outside independent institutions. The government can easily undermine what has been achieved, and that's really where the problem lies. And again, I'll come back to the issue of good government later. Okay. It's okay for now.
Thank you, Professor Hashi, for pointing out at some of the issues that we will, be coming back. Professor Bartlett, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So hello from Pristina.
Pardon?
Hello. Okay, I would like to move with the second question. And so since we're talking about institutional reforms and how to upgrade them in order to support Kosovo to avoid this middle income trap, a key driver to escaping the middle income trap for so many of the converging EU countries is considered to be the very process of the EU integration. So I would like to hear your views on what would be some best practices, some lessons, that we can learn as a country for those countries which were able to actually, through the EU integration process, to move from the middle income bracket to the high income bracket.
Okay, well, that's a big question. I mean, I suppose the starting point would be, what is the middle income trap? And as far as I understand it, middle income trap is when a country begins its development on the basis of low wages and perhaps attracting foreign investment, but being competitive on the basis of low wages, and then reaches a certain level. And what would have been called in the analysis of the Soviet system extensive economic growth. And then, as with those countries, they face a problem of transitioning to a phase of intensive economic growth when the sort of surplus labour force is exhausted and wages start to rise. And you get into a situation of labour shortages, and so you need to move from extensive to intensive growth, which implies innovation and new technologies and all these sorts of things to raise the productivity, which is what Jeffrey Pugh was talking about this morning, how to raise productivity. And I mean, well, the first thing is, is Kosovo in this situation of having exhausted its labour surplus and reaching a point of labour shortages and skill shortages and so on? Well, I mean, maybe Kosovo's not quite there yet. I think in many of the Western Balkan countries there are skills shortages beginning to emerge, but unemployment rates are still high. You mentioned earlier that the labour participation rate is very low in Kosovo, especially female labour participation rate. So there's probably still a lot to do in terms of this extensive pattern of growth by drawing into the labour force the workers who are not yet involved. So, I mean, much can be done, I think, in developing still Kosovo's sort of extensive path of growth by utilising resources that are available in a more efficient way. Iraj talked about the problem of applying regulation consistently, getting rid of corruption, and all these sorts of things which reduce the efficiency of resource allocation. So simple things can be done to improve productivity, improve the efficiency of resource allocation. There was discussion of the education system. I mean, if you look at the PISA study, the 2022 PISA study, which is the OECD International Study of Educational Performance, Kosovo well, it measures the educational performance in reading, writing, maths and science for 15-year-olds. And if you look at the comparison across the different Western Balkan countries, Kosovo is at the bottom of that list. And so the education system is poorly performing and is underfunded. We also heard this morning that the proportion of GDP spent on education is low, very low by international standards. So by improving education, certainly one would hope that the quality of human capital will be increased, and that in itself will help to raise productivity. Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that this middle income trap is perhaps not quite the right model by which to analyse the Kosovo economy at the moment. I mean, I suppose if you look at other countries in the region, for example, Serbia, which has achieved quite high growth in recent years, while having all these problems of corruption and absence of effective regulation and all these sorts of things. What they've done is to go for a program of attracting foreign direct investment. So foreign direct investment has been piling into Serbia and has been supporting export-led growth. And the unemployment rate has come down dramatically, and indeed there is now a shortage of labour and a shortage of skilled labour in various areas. So that's one way forward to try to attract foreign investment into the country, and I think Kosovo could learn a lot from the Serbian example of how to do that, using special economic zones, for example, to attract investment. But that's very often, that investment is often, as I said, it's extending the scope of this extensive growth, because much of the labour that's employed by those companies, which are basically re-exporting back into the EU. German companies, for example, are coming in, doing a bit of processing, exporting products back into the EU, and creating jobs, but creating low productivity, low skill jobs. It's had, as I said, it's had a big inroad on unemployment, but it certainly isn't moving from extensive to intensive growth. It's not overcoming that, if you want to call it, the middle income trap. But it's not really a trap, because you can still get a lot of growth out of that approach. That's one thing. You could go for a policy, an approach, a development approach based on foreign direct investment and low-skilled labour, bringing into the labour market all those labour resources which are currently underused. And the alternative approach is not to go for foreign direct investment. Perhaps foreign direct investment is mainly going to other countries at the moment. Perhaps foreign direct investment is not attracted to Kosovo because of political risks and things like that. So the other way is through, as I think I would support the idea of Geoffrey Pugh, developing human capital, upskilling the labour force, developing a more qualified and better educated labour force, trying to raise those PISA scores up to the level of at least the average in the region, perhaps further, and developing the domestic economy, whether it's in industry or services, on the basis of SMEs, small businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises, indigenous entrepreneurship, that sort of thing. So having a more domestic approach to development rather than relying on foreign investment. I mean, I think foreign investment itself is a sort of potential trap, because those foreign investors are coming into a country in order to seek out low wage costs, And of course, as soon as the wage costs rise, as they're starting to do in Serbia, then those companies, those foreign investors will start to leave the country in search of more profitable opportunities elsewhere, for example, perhaps in Ethiopia or somewhere like that. So it's not really a very sustainable approach, and I think a much more sustainable approach for Kosovo would be to develop indigenous resources, indigenous labour force, by improving the public expenditure on education, health, and other public services, which will raise the quality of human capital and distribute the benefits of growth more widely amongst the population than a policy of relying on foreign investment. So that's my thoughts on the matter.
Thank you, Professor Bartlett. So the focus then is on human capital development. You also mentioned public expenditure to invest in human capital. So I would like to actually move to Professor Besimi, because he's, apart from his academic background, he's also hold very high positions also as a Minister of Economy. So given Kosovo's solid fiscal baseline, according to you, how can then we transform this fiscal prudence into a developmental fiscal governance in order to tackle these issues that are raised by the panelists, but also in the report?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Demuke. Before I respond to this question, sorry misusing this panel, but I want really to congratulate Riinvest. I remember the first years of Riinvest. I was just finished my bachelor's studies in Skopje. Then they were on this crisis in Kosovo conflict. There were a lot of enthusiasm among them to bring where is Institute today, but much more what Kosovo did meanwhile. So congratulations to all of them, and thank you for inviting. I met a lot of friends from Staffordshire University and a professor, so it's great. Sorry for this, but I wanted to say that really this is something that we should appreciate. This is an asset for Kosovo and the region.
And if I can just interject here, we're all linked to Riinvest Institute. I mean, I used to say this is my, when you come to your old house. Good. So I think we have the same feeling.
Yeah, we have. Thanks. I'm really pleased to be here. I will try to share with you some of my experience, and also from this what we do from the academic point of view. Actually, as the panel is about the institution and economic growth, and here is also the fiscal policy. When you look at the numbers, and you go to a doctor and you have some temperature and he checks the data first, you see the fiscal prudency all the way in Kosovo, the lowest fiscal deficit, the lowest public debt. So at the end you ask, what is this for? What does this serve for growth? And I think it's good that it's there, because on the other side, if you can use these tools, it means you have to have strong institutions, the credibility. And this is probably how it came to this, and also when you have the currency on the other side and monetary policy, which is not in our side. But this is what actually in these academic papers called borrowing the credibility. And institutionalize some of the policies. And here on the fiscal policy, what is left, I will come to the institutional part according to the time how we have. But you see on the structure inside, if you look the global figures, you see low deficit, prudent fiscal balance, and you see where the money goes for. The wage bill is similar to the region, but probably because of the history, you have these social benefits are lower than the average of the region. And then again, the capital expenditure there, which is just below the average of the region. And when you look, and I'm comparing the region, but if you compare the region with developed countries, you see that the region is not really performing on these figures, as you called it earlier, middle income trap. So we are looking for growth. So where is this that we can, the region and Kosovo, especially it's the case of this conference, It is the perspective, it is what we are probably tomorrow, there will be, I didn't see in the agenda today, but it comes with institutional work, that's the leadership. This is where people build institutions. This is where they take the processes forward. It is important when we talk about this, especially when you have to take reforms and take the responsibility. You recall to the Nobel Prize winners, and actually when they mention about the institution, they explain also the leadership. Why these countries failed? Because they didn't have the credibility, the leadership and the institutions were weak and they didn't have the credibility. No one trusted them because they knew after the election or whatever is the process, they will fail again or will cheat again. So in Kosovo case, in terms of the fiscal prudency, I think working on the further, what we did in North Macedonia is we established with the law this fiscal council. Now Kosovo doesn't have that problem with fiscal balances, but it's important to have to institutionalize it. It helps the public debate about fiscal policies, and also important to work on the structure. To introduce midterm planning for the budget, which is important part, implementation of this, and an inclusiveness of the process of the budget planning, introducing these KPI indexes, input, output, and outcome indexes. So the debate in the parliament goes on these issues, on the policies. So, I mean, Shiponia mentioned earlier on and also from Vienna about the quality, where we spend, not only the quantity. And this is where it comes to. Institutional debate, policy makers, decision makers. You nurture the debate. You put the light where you want to. And this is the policy debate, the quality debate. So this is what on the fiscal policy can be also another recommendation for the next coming government in Kosovo. In fiscal policy, how we can use it as one of the gears of growth. I have some other aspects about the institution and growth, but probably will come later, so I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Besimi. I would like now to also move the discussion more on, this generally the relationship between the effects of institutions in growth models, and that is what Professor Efendic has worked a lot. And so I would like to ask you to sort of tell us what is the evidence when it comes to the relationship between the measurable effects of institutions on these growth models, but then also a little bit dwell on the effects of institutions over different time horizons. Because, okay, the question is, I mean, is this a middle income trap, or maybe we still haven't, reached there? So I would like to sort of, you take this question and maybe elaborate more on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Venera. Before I start answering these tough institutional questions, I would like also to congratulate to Riinvest Institute and the director. 3 decades, because this is 3 decades of being a part of Kosovo's institutional environment and supporting, obviously, socio-economic development of this country. And as we know, 3 decades is a long run in economics, so it is already enough to do a long-run analysis what Riinvest Institute has done here. It is quite common or understandable to say that institutions affect economic growth, and as Easterly pointed at in one article, over 50 sources of economic growth are identified in the literature, which are robust, and institutions are one of them. So I think everyone agrees that institutions are important for economic growth. And the next question is how important, because as economists we want to know, we want to measure stuff. Fortunately, we have had, let's say, enough contribution even here in the context of measuring institutions, because we measure quality or efficiency of institutions today, in the context of putting institutions into growth model and measuring their effect on economic growth. So we can find a lot of empirical evidence, a lot of theoretical evidence, and I'm also happy that we have sort of policy approval, which happened last year when the Nobel Prize Award was given to Acemoglu, Johnson, and Robinson for their contribution in institutional economics. So all agree that institutions do matter, and the question is what is their effect actually on economic growth? When you look the literature, transition, non-transition, Western Balkan literature, you can find quite heterogeneous results, and sometimes even the findings which are different. So that triggered actually my attention, because I did my PhD from institutional economics, and thanks to my supervisor who is here, we decided to investigate this empirical literature and to see what will be so-called authentic empirical effect of institutions on economic growth. Because when we have a lot of studies, that sometimes we are confused about this effect, and we really did the first meta-regression analysis in the field of institutional economics. And I do remember that we included 52 empirical studies, all studies that existed at that moment, trying to see, let's say, what is the effect size of institutions on economic growth. So when we did all algorithms, which are quite complicated in meta-analysis, it is published, so hopefully it should have scientific credibility. The quantitative effect of institutions on economic outcomes in terms of partial correlations, which was identified in these studies and which was statistically stable, is 0.4, or 40%. That's a very strong effect. In the context of policy implications, that would mean, for example, for Kosovo, if Kosovo improves certain institutions by 10%, the effect on economic outcomes or economic growth will be around 4%. Quite strong effect on economic growth. And this effect is sometimes ignored, and as we can see, the improvement in institutions can be an important source of economic growth, especially in those countries which do have space to improve institutions. The EU countries, the efficiency of institutions, for example, in EU countries is 80% or more, while efficiency of the countries in the Western Balkan region, in Bosnia and Kosovo, sometimes is around 40, 50, 60%. So a lot of space for improvement, a lot of potential sources of economic growth are there. So that is the context of the quantitative effect of institutions on economic growth. The next question is, which you mentioned, is the timing effect. The timing effect was also under this analysis and some other research which I've done as part of my research. What is specific about institutions is that they don't have contemporaneous effect on economic growth. They don't have even short-run effect on economic growth, but actually the effect is with lags. It's not long, it's sort of medium run, I would say. So the effect on economic growth is the strongest, and it can be identified with precision after 5 years. So it takes around 5 years when we get some institutional improvements that they are really transferred into economic growth, which partly explains why there is a lack of interest by policymakers to sometimes conduct serious institutional reforms. They don't know about these findings, but actually they feel it. Because as you can see, the effect goes beyond the electoral cycle, which is typically 4 years. So they prefer to do policies which will have the effect within the electoral cycle. So that is something which is specific about institutional effect. And probably I was thinking on my feet right now, it might be associated to the context of middle income trap, because 5 years difference is something obviously which should be taken into account, and probably sometimes we are putting too much pressure on this trap, but sometimes it simply takes time. It needs some time that some reforms are transferred into the economic growth. And finally, in any institutional environment, I mean, this is what Daron Acemoglu was researching, and he was trying to set up a model of institutional change, because every time we have forces which are interested to keep institutions as they are, we have forces which are interested for changes. So there is a tension between persistence and change in institutions. So he was trying to make a model which will explain this tension, this link, this challenge, this problem which we have in reality, but to my knowledge this hasn't been sorted out. So this is something which we all the time have within our institutional environments, tensions for change and persistence, and of course political environment, geopolitical context can make some changes in this respect, but this is also something which is important to address. Finally, the issue of implementation, which Professor Hashi mentioned, is very important. Sometimes we do have good institutions on the paper, good rules of the game, which are not implemented, which are then empty shelves. They don't mean anything. That is something which is really specific also to this region, and this is something which we can discuss probably later on if you want. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Efendish, also for pointing out about, the really significant effect of institutions on economic growth, but also about the issue of the time lag, so that, it's going to take some time to see the effects. So we take cue from this, and I would like to ask Professor Krasniqi. I mean, he's been extensively involved in research, but also in practice in terms of entrepreneurship, innovation, development of skills. And then I would like to ask you, so since we're talking about, these also time horizons, if you were to sort of design a roadmap for innovation for Kosovo, because that's, I would say it's your niche and your expertise, what should Kosovo institutional roadmap for this innovation look like over the next, let's say, 5 or 10 years?
Okay, thank you, Venera, and thank you, Riinvest, for bringing us in this truly international forum for discussing some important issues in institutional theory, institutional policy, and so on. So I will start from a theoretical point of view about the institutions and the importance of institutions for entrepreneurship, especially high-growth entrepreneurship. This is an ongoing debate since decades ago when one of the greatest economists of American economists, William Baumol, produced a paper on theory of entrepreneurship, productive, unproductive, and destructive, which basically frames institutions as important devices that create incentives for society, for behavior, for entrepreneurs to channel into different types of entrepreneurship. There is ongoing debate also in Europe. I recently was listening to a debate even in European Parliament about the discussion why Europe doesn't have big companies, unicorn, or fast-growing companies like Google, Amazon, or Tesla, and so on. So even between countries with pretty much more democratic institutions, quite efficient institutions, we have ongoing debate about what ecosystem we need in terms of entrepreneurship and innovation in order to be able to produce high-level entrepreneurship, as I mentioned. In Kosovo, since I started, I will just draw back a bit attention. Since I started to work at Riinvest, one of my first roles was to take part in a Riinvest SME survey. And I remember at the time that when we did the list of different barriers, whatever we did with the companies, it came out that institutional variables or barriers are more important than skills and innovation and other internal related factors of the company. And of course, at the time, because the business environment and institution were very weak, still we have problems with institution, but specifically at that time, after the war, when we started everything from the scratch, the companies didn't see that they could do much of the advantage, comparative advantage compared to their competitors based on the innovation, based on the research, because they were operating in a hostile environment, unpredictable, with a lot of institutional changes, high corruption, and so on. And according to the institutional theory, of course, with evolving of the private sector, becoming more complex relationships between companies, the need that those companies require more advanced institutions in order to support building these relationships, especially if we are at the stage that our companies and SMEs now are looking for foreign markets, building relationships with other companies, and the need for more formalized way of doing business and creating these supporting institutions like intellectual property rights system, contracts, efficiency of government in conducting policies, licensing, and even government trust, which is very important for any kind of institutional development. Because if there is no institutional trust, so entrepreneurs will become more risk averse, and of course will not make investment, and we will not have full potential exploited. I would point out especially speed of institutional reform, which is very important, especially in terms of the interaction between formal and informal institutions. Adnan and others have mentioned that institutional changes and policy changes need some time to take place because there is a time lag between the time we introduce any institutional change until it translates into the results. But even more complex is informal institutions that needs, in some cases, even decades, or according to Oliver Williamson, maybe 100 years to change the culture to complement these institutions. Now, going back to the institutional setup in Kosovo and how we could promote innovation, and maybe discussing some of the findings that Riinvest Institute produced in the report on changing this model of economic growth from consumption-driven or migration-driven consumption model of economic growth. We need to support innovation. We invest very small percentage of GDP in education and research, is 0.1 to 0.2% of GDP, and then we have 0.5 in Western Balkans and 1.7 in European Union. Even this doesn't show the clear picture, because if we take into account the structure of investment in European Union, for example, around 60% of the research and development is coming from the private sector, which basically tells a story how private sector is involved in research and in funding research projects, applied research projects, which leading to possibly patents and licensing and other intellectual property products. So we need to change the system because we lack institution. I did one policy study where I was analyzing the institutional setup of innovation. And when we see in terms of the institutions, I divided it into a macro, meso level and micro level institutional setup. We have the micro level when we have the laws and the regulation, which pretty much works quite well in Kosovo with all these strategic documents that have been approved. In all government documents, there's a clear evidence that we need innovation, we need education, we need skills to support innovative firms. But when it comes to the meso effect, for example, national supporting institutions that could translate these policy level and vision for innovation into something which could be translated in terms of practical results of the private sector in gaining competitive advantage through innovative products. We don't have that, and this is a missing link because we still have companies that do well in some aspects in innovation, especially in ICT. We have maybe problems with universities and other research performers, as we call, but this missing link, national fund, is very important, and it's missing. Although government declared that they will invest, at least it was a plan for 60 million euros initially, but the fund still is not in place, and I cannot see that it will happen in the near future. On the other hand, despite the funding that is very important, and I see this importance mainly in terms of building absorption capacities or building capabilities of these firms to absorb those funds from the government or government contracts that are based on research, but also regionally, because there are a lot of funds in the region or projects like Horizon that Kosovo is not performing well. So the initial phase would be to increase these capacities of local firms. And coming back, increasing this potential of SMEs would put Kosovo private sector in another level. We mentioned here, maybe we'll talk later, but in terms of FDI, it's important that we have also local capacities. I did one study with Professor Bartlett on Western Balkans, and we did interview many multinationals in the region, but we found little evidence of translating these FDI into tangible results. And this was mainly because of the limited capacities of these companies to get engaged in local, but also even more importantly in global value chains of the companies that were present in industrial economic zone. In this case, investing in skills, research and innovation would be something that is a must for our government, and as soon as possible we need to have some funding, especially in initial phase that private sector is, there is a need some support from as an external driver.
Thank you, Besnik, for covering all these aspects which are important to support and induce innovation in Kosovo. So we actually have 30 minutes left. So yeah, there's been a lot of things that we want to cover. Maybe briefly, since we touched upon the aspect of foreign direct investments, and also we touched upon, you know, the skills that are needed, local capacities, I would just ask, maybe I'll start with Professor Hashi, and then whoever would like to sort of give your opinions. I know we've been talking also a lot about the role of diaspora in this respect. And we've worked also a lot as part of Riinvest Institute, and there's a lot of studies, but I would like to have a fresh perspective from you. So in terms of diaspora and their role, and in terms of, you know, attracting foreign direct investments, what kind of institutional frameworks you think that we need to sort of have in place, what we need to do in order to systematically engage the diaspora in Kosovo's industrial development? Because now the focus would all the time, and the discussion is about, you know, these industrial policies, this sectoral support. So any of you, maybe I start with Professor Hashi, who would like to, you know, give your contribution. We can actually discuss about that. And then if time allows us, we can maybe open the floor for a couple of questions.
Thank you, Venera. I'll try to be quick. I'd like to make just a couple of points. Firstly, FDI and the importance of foreign direct investment. This has been very important in all transition economies, and no doubt a major factor. In Kosovo, it hasn't been a major factor. There are very few manufacturing companies that have come to Kosovo. You know, the first 6 months after the transition began in Poland, major brewing companies came and bought the Polish beer companies. In Croatia, the same thing. Brewing companies, one of the first companies to go. Food processing companies, chocolate companies, and so on and so forth. These haven't come to Kosovo. Swiss Diamond Hotel is one of the major foreign investment, but it's really diaspora investment. We don't have any Sheraton and Intercontinental and Hiltons that have come to Kosovo, but they've gone to Skopje and Tirana. So, and this is really the elephant in the room. We've been here all morning, and nobody's mentioned that Kosovo is not, from the point of view of foreign investors, a normal country. It's a country partly at war, but certainly subject to strong political instability. And foreign investors don't go somewhere where things might be unstable because their money is at stake. And so one of the most important things that Kosovo government should do, I know that at various times they have tried, it's not just up to them, it's also up to Serbian government. But the issue of relations with Serbia has to be resolved. It's been 35 years since the Serbian army left Kosovo, hopefully for good. But the problems have remained. And this is a major barrier to foreign investors. It has to be recognized. We don't even talk about it. I would say this is a major issue. Apart from that is the issue of corruption
in those diaspora. And the second, I just read a paper that for Albania, which says that one of the main responsible factors for migration in Albania currently is corruption. So perception of corruption is one of the key factors that drives migration. And the second, there is evidence that we don't see much brain gain in terms of the numbers, but I would go beyond these numbers from the policy perspective. It's not just about the numbers, how many people return to Kosovo. As long as we have companies successful in Germany or our diaspora there that create links with the local companies, I think they play much bigger role. And according to the evidence with the Union of Albanian German Businesses, we have close to 40,000 companies in Germany run by Kosovo Albanians, close to 10,000 in France, which is most surprising about France, in all the sectors, mainly in the construction and in different sectors that could create linkages with local companies. So beyond remittances, beyond financial support, there is a huge potential that is not utilized, and we need to see how these supporting institutions could help us to untap this potential.
Actually, yeah, that's a very good point. And again, it contributes to the debate that, how we move from this consumption, growth, and then we start to use these investments into new startups or invest in businesses. So I think that's a very good point. So anyone would like to add? I think Professor Efendic has worked a lot on informal economy, or maybe your perspective on that, because it was touched upon also as a topic, this aspect of just not formal institutions, but also informal. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I could talk a lot about informal institutions, and this is something which is also very important and rather unexplored dimension of institutional environments. Today we do know quite a lot about formal institutions, those which we can see, while informal institutions, those which we can't see, we don't know enough. I will try to connect this discussion, the role of diaspora, informal institutions, corruption. This is all interlinked, actually. First of all, the institutional approach towards corruption is that corruption is institutional failure. This is what I like. Probably someone will not like this definition, but it is not the indication that bad people live in these societies and doing bad things, but actually that the system is not functioning, the institutions are not functioning. And we have even papers which use corruption as a measure of institutional inefficiency. This is the indicator that institutions are not working very well. And that is the problem for diaspora. I did some research on diaspora as well, and entrepreneurs who return to Bosnia, for example, in this region, who run their businesses in our societies, and in the context of their critiques, actually, they are even more critical towards our institutional environment than the host populations. We live in these societies, we are critical of our institutions, but we probably don't have enough experience like those who used to live longer in Germany, in Austria, and Switzerland. They returned, they invested some money, and they compare actually the institutional environments in our societies and something which they saw in these developed countries. So they are we did the surveys, and they are even more critical than what is sort of average critique of all of us. So diaspora is very critical for our institutions. We should be aware of that, and even more than what we do here. And what is the problem for them is actually even more problematic part is informal institutional part, because they were absent for years. Informal institutions are built in, on the ground. It takes time that they are built. They come, they can see formal institutions, they can see formal rules of the game, but actually their link with informalities is weak or does not exist, and they have a problem how to navigate between formal and informal institutions in our societies. And in our societies, we have to navigate between these two types of institutions, because informal institutions are very present in our societies. I will present tomorrow results from a survey, because I was involved in one project focused only on informal institutions. That was Horizon project. In Kosovo, in Bosnia, actually in all Western Balkan countries, more than 70% of respondents believe and rely on different informalities in our society. So they are very present, and mainly as a substitute for formal institutional deficiency. So we use informalities to close this gap, to navigate, to get things done in everyday life, and all these informalities are not negative by definition. It is also very important to mention, because we have also positive informalities, we have negative informalities and informal institutions. And they will always exist. The main challenge is how to set up and to change institutional environment that formal and informal institutions are complements, that they are aligned, but not that we have a gap between them or that they substitute each other. So that is the main challenge. And the answer for this is worth, I think, $1 million.
It is. At least we're trying to sort of gather some, as I said, fresh perspective, because all the time we discuss about these issues. Professor Bassimi, would you like to give your...
Yeah, thank you. A lot of aspects were said so far, but I will try just to put an additional perspective. First of all, this FDIs, when talking like any other economic issue, it is complex. A lot of interaction, a lot of factors affecting it. And when you look as a package of all this stuff, then you say, okay, FDIs in these countries are more effective than the others. And it's including, as you explained at the beginning, in others. I will just list without explaining some of them, and will remain on what I want to stress, in addition to what was said. Business climate, all bureaucracy, all the information licenses, everywhere the same problem. Rule of law, implementation, enforcement of legislation, corruption explained, labor, wages, and skills as well. And infrastructure, informal economy, diaspora, all of this. human capital, I want to stress, and when we talk about labor, you know, this is the perspective when we are talking now from the perspective of what the country should do, because FDIs will affect growth. Now when you sit on the table, so this is not academic experience, this is from, you are in front of FDIs, investors, and you are on the other table as representing the country policymakers. You know what they ask? They have the data, wages, this, they will read it, and they can check it. And they ask these questions. And you go to get licenses, how much it takes, and someone calls them on the phone, you know, today I cannot do this, but I know someone that can do this, so this is what we talk, informality and potential corruption. But what is the other important, infrastructure and all that, is something which when they come, they are not coming for all markets. They don't come for Kosovo market. They don't come for North Macedonia market. They are not coming for Montenegro. We are very small for these big companies. What we can do better for them in their global map so they can be more competitive in global market. And this is comes the predictability, apart from the costs. Predictability in all these aspects, but also where the region goes, where the country goes. Sitting, again, sitting as on the table as a policymaker, as a Minister of Finance, after I telling all these figures, all the stories for my country, at the end, you know, they were polite, some of them listen very carefully and make questions that are of their specific interest, but at the end, you know what they were asking me? What is North Macedonia doing with European Union? When are you going to solve your issues and join the EU? Because this is what we are talking about, this institutional credibility. I'm not saying here, idealizing Europe, that everything will flourish the next day. But investors want to know this, wants to know where we are going. So what their investment to expect in the next period. So regional, and the list that you are making, please add regional cooperation, that we need to work as a region, and also European perspective as the institutional context for foreign direct investments. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bessimi. Professor Bartlett, so anything maybe that was not mentioned you would like to touch upon on these topics of FDI, diaspora, human capital, skills development that would be also important as a takeaway for, from this panel and the conference? We cannot hear you. Can you please check whether you're on mute?
Okay, I think that's,
yeah.
You can hear me now. Yeah, yeah, I mean, I found the discussion very interesting and covered a wide range. I think what is sort of needed is a bit more coherence, perhaps, in terms of the theoretical background of the relationships in institutions and economic growth. And you mentioned the work of Asimoglu and Robinson on extractive and inclusive institutions right at the beginning, but we didn't hear much of that in the discussion. And so perhaps we could, you know, there's not time, but we could easily talk much more about that. I think the main theoretical framework that is being implicitly used is the framework of new institutional economics, which was developed by people like Douglas North and Coase and Alkin and Demsetz and people like that, emphasizing the role of property rights, corruption, regulation, efficient government, and all these sort of things that we've been talking about. So that's the sort of framework within which this whole discussion is it takes place. And then there's another framework which I'd just like to put on the table, which hasn't been discussed very much or alluded to at all today, which is the framework of the developed by originally by Peter Hall and Soskis at the LSE on the varieties of capitalism, and it's setting out the idea that capitalist economies are structured around different sets of institutions. So the way they presented it, they had the liberal market economies, which were the sort of Anglo-Saxon economies, basically working on the using free market principles. And you may have informal and formal institutions in there. You know. But and then you contrast that with the coordinated market economies, countries like Germany and Central European economies, which operate on very different bases of coordination between labour and capital, participation within businesses, between organising the coordination between management and workers and that sort of thing. So it's a very different type of capitalist system. And more recently, we've had the discussion about forms of capitalism based around foreign direct investment in Eastern Europe, which has been characterized as a sort of dependent market economy model. And also looking at East Asia, and we were talking about Singapore earlier, a discussion of state-mediated economies, where the state plays the leading role, which is obviously very different to the liberal market economy. And so I think we need to think about what type of economy Kosovo is and what wants to become. Does Kosovo want to move more towards the German coordinated market economy, which has been the sort of central driver of EU economic growth over the last few decades, perhaps faltering now? Or does it want to move more in the direction of Singapore, you know, state-mediated economy? I mean, you have to take into account that Singapore is a fairly authoritarian political system, and that's one very big jump from where Kosovo is at the moment. And I would probably characterize Kosovo at the moment as a liberal market economy, and probably that is difficult to change that direction. So the sort of policies for growth that are relevant to liberal market economies are probably relevant to Kosovo. The sort of policies for growth that are relevant to state-mediated economies such as Singapore are probably not so relevant to Kosovo. And also the coordinated market economy model would take quite a long time to develop. So I think that's just another angle on this whole discussion of institutions, and to put it in a bit of a wider perspective. So, thanks.
Thank you very much for bringing us this perspective, looking at what kind of theoretical frameworks, we should sort of see for Kosovo in terms of their future growth path and, their future trajectory. We have less than 10 minutes, so if anyone has any pressing questions to the panel, we would be happy to open the panel and open the floor for your questions. Any questions? So it seems that there's been maybe 3 panels, and I guess we need to wrap up. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Thank you to the panelists again for your great insights, for sharing with us the views about Kosovo's economic development path. This was very insightful. This was very also informative. Okay. All right, then, so I'll just wrap up. So, everything was revolving around the role of institutions. We started with Acemoglu and Johnson, and then we can say, actually, you see, institutions are very important, so it's institutions. I hope this will serve as a kind of new perspective, some maybe new things to ponder about when it comes to all these million-dollar questions that Adnan was referring to. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed discussing with you, and thank you also to the panel for being here.
I promised I won't get back here, but I have to. Just a quick announcement, but for the For tomorrow? No. This is for tomorrow before we call it a day. There was a typo in the agenda that was printed. So in order not to make any confusion, the registration is from 9:30, as it was in the initial one that you received. So we start with the first and second panel in parallel at 9:30 up until 10:45. And then the third and fourth panel, again in parallel, start at 11:15. So see you tomorrow at 9, and we call it a day. Thank you.